Okay, part 4, the moon. The moon's one of my favorite things to look at in the nighttime sky with the telescope because it's so close to us. We can see lots of details. We can see craters. We can see Maria. Very, very interesting. Now, looking at the moon, it's the second brightest object in the sky, but of course we know it's not really producing its own light. It's actually reflecting the light from the sun. And closest celestial body to the Earth, by far, nothing really gets anywhere near as close to us, with the exception of maybe a few meteors and things that enter the atmosphere. Most ancient calendars were actually based on the lunar cycle. And the calendar that we have today is sort of a modified or morphed version of some of these lunar cycle calendars, these lunar calendars. If we think about the month, each month is roughly equal to about one lunar cycle. The moon going from new to first quarter to full to last quarter back to new. That full cycle is really approximately about a month, and that's why we break the year up into months. The week, in fact, represents a quarter cycle. So from new moon to first quarter, that would be about a week long. From first quarter to full, same thing, about a week. From full to last quarter, about a week. Last quarter to new, about a week. So we break up our calendar into weeks and months, which are really based on the lunar cycle. Of course, our calendar itself is really based on the orbit of the Earth around the sun, so it's more of a solar calendar, but we still incorporate many of the lunar aspects into this. The moon takes 29.5 days to go through all of its phases, again, roughly a month. Okay, some of our months are 30 days, some are 31 days. Of course, this year, February is 29 days. And we actually stretch our months out a little bit greater than a lunar cycle because we had to fit them into 1 year. And again, it takes 29.5 days for the Earth to go through its phases. But actually, the moon only goes around the Earth in 27.3 days. The reason why we have this difference in what's called the sidereal and the synodic period is because the moon, the position of the moon in the sky, as it relates to the sun, is actually a function of the Earth, the moon's orbit around the Earth, but also the Earth's orbit around the sun. So this combined motion of the Earth and the moon puts it one lunar cycle of 29.5 days. Because when we're looking at the moon, okay, we're looking at the different phases based on the orientation of where the sun is, where the moon is, and where the Earth is. So we have to take into account the motion of all three bodies in determining the full cycle. Okay, so cycles of the moon, very important to know the basic parts of the cycle. We start each cycle with a new moon. Basically, when the new moon takes place on the Earth, we can't see the moon because the moon is lost in the glare of the sun. If you remember from our earlier discussion, the sunlight is scattered by the air molecules, and when we look up to see where the moon is during a new moon, we're looking very close to where the sun is. The moon doesn't create its own light. It's scattered, it reflects the light of the sun, therefore the moon can't be seen. We then go to a waxing crescent. Suddenly the moon appears soon after sunset in the evening sky. After 1 week after the new moon, we get to first quarter. That's where the moon is at its highest point in the sky during sunset. And a first quarter moon will set right around midnight. Full moon basically is on the opposite side of the sky as the sun. It rises as the sun sets, it sets as the sun rises. Last quarter is a phase of the moon that we probably don't see very much. The last quarter rises at midnight. well, maybe you're a night owl and you get to see the last quarter moon quite a bit. Okay? But the last quarter is 1 week after a full moon and 1 week before the whole cycle begins again. In between, there's sort of these partial phases. We have the waxing crescent, where it's less than a quarter. We call it a quarter because when we look at the moon, we can only see half of it. And if half of that half is illuminated, we're down to a quarter. So the waxing crescent is less than the first quarter, but more than new moon. After first quarter, we go more than a quarter. We're at the gibbous phase. We're not quite full, where we can see half of the moon illuminated. And after the full moon, we go waning, meaning that we're getting less and less light on the surface of the moon. Waxing means more light, waning means less. We hit the last quarter, and then early in the morning, we can see a waning crescent rise just before the sun rises. So those are the basic phases of the moon. And, we go from new, waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, full moon, waning gibbous, last quarter, waning crescent. This is a chart, I'm not going to go through every single date and time, of all the different phases of the moon for 2020. So if you're interested in seeing these, this is on the PowerPoint. It gives you the exact date and time that each of these phases will take place. So there you go. Oh, blue moon. Everybody asks what a blue moon is. Originally, a blue moon was supposed to be an extra moon in a particular season. So at the beginning of the year, the first quarter of the year, if we had an extra blue moon, an extra full moon, it would be a blue moon. But in Sky Telescope magazine, somebody messed it up and wrote that the blue moon was 2 full moons in the same month. And that's the way it's pretty much stuck since then. So we have 1 blue moon in October. We have a full moon on October 1st. The extra moon happens the 31st. So on Halloween, that will be a blue moon. If we go to the original meaning of blue moon, guess we have our first quarter of the year, no extra moons, second quarter of the year, no extra moons, third quarter of the year, no extra moons. It would actually make the December 29th moon the original definition for a blue moon. So there you go. Full moon, brightest phase of the moon. Obviously, the entire half of the moon that we see is lit by the sun. Full moon's the worst time to go out and view anything. First of all, through a telescope, nothing's casting shadows. The sun lights directly overhead, so you really can't see many features on the moon. Also, the moon's pretty much creating so much light in the sky, it's hard to see other objects. So the full moon, nice to be out and be able to see everything around you, especially in the countryside where we don't have a lot of light pollution. But astronomically, really not very interesting unless an eclipse is taking place. There are some interesting names for full moons. This is not astronomical, this is more tradition. The colonists named the moons as the Native Americans named moons, but when the British colonists first got here, they sort of changed some of the names that the Native Americans had. But again, based on the different month, you get these different moons. And of course, with October, the harvest moon happens at the beginning of the month, what the Native Americans would call a hunter moon. And then the moon at the end of the month actually becomes the blue moon. So again, at the beginning of the phases, we can't see the new moon. The new moon is too close to the sun in the sky to be seen. However, we first see a waxing crescent in the evening, a few days into the lunar cycle. At the end of the lunar cycle, you've got to get up early before the sun rises to see the waning crescent. Here's a neat rule of thumb. Every hour, okay, I should say, every succeeding day, the moon rises about an hour later. So if the moon were, I should say, rises and sets an hour later, if you see a very, very young crescent after sunset, the next night it will be 1 hour further up in the sky and therefore set 1 hour later. Here's a very, very young moon. You can barely see it right there in the planet Venus in the sky. But again, the different phases of the moon start with new moon first. The sunlight is basically striking the part of the moon behind us, so we can't really see the moon. We go to first quarter, full moon, last quarter, and back to new again. Here's what the first quarter looks like. Here's what the last quarter looks like. Again, a quarter of the moon is sunlit that we can see. We can only see half the moon at any one time. So if it's half illuminated, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. Gibbous is a phase in between full and quarter. And, well, that's it.